Hello and welcome to the Soul and Strategy podcast. My name is Sabine. I'm a spiritual life coach and soul business coach. And today I felt really called to talk about intuition and I guess calling as well. Because I've had a few things happen or shift in my life. And I've just tried to sit with this, I guess, decision of what to do next. And maybe that's you as well. Maybe something has happened or shifted in your life and now you've got this opportunity maybe. Or maybe you've had a calling for a while and you've heard that intuition for a while, but you're still sitting on the edge if you should go ahead, if you maybe should start the business, if you should sign up to the training or reach out to the person that you think you can help. So this episode is more of like an intuitive, I guess, episode. I haven't really prepared anything, but I just felt called to speak to this. So when I was in a kirtan session the other day, and kirtan, in case you don't know what that is, it's mantra singing. So something we do, for example, in a yogic tradition, you might know Om. Om is a mantra. So if you sing Om multiple times with other people together, that's kirtan as well. So I was sitting in this kirtan session and the teacher was singing the Kali mantra. And Kali is the goddess of... She's like the embodiment, I guess, of destruction, of cleansing things that don't serve you anymore. She's the one like holding a head of a man in one hand and knives in the other. And yeah, it can feel really threatening. But in this session, during this mantra, I remembered that I'm the creator of my own life. I remembered that we all are, the manifestors, creators of what we want to see in the world. So when it comes to our calling and our intuition, it's basically that seed that is planted in our heart to create that very, very thing, right? And often we have fears. We have fears to follow that seed or to follow that calling. And for me, or I think for many people, it can be, for example, financial. So what if I quit my job and start this business? Or what if I invest in a coaching, training, or a mentor and it's not paying off? And I also want you to sit with, what if you don't do it? What is the price of not doing the thing? So for example, what is the price of not investing into starting your own business? For example, with training or with a coach. What is the price of not following that calling? Because often the price, is the longer you wait, gets higher and higher. And it's kind of that analogy of if you're on the wrong train, the longer you stay on the wrong train, the longer it will take you to get home. So if you're on the wrong train and you're there for an hour, it will take you an hour to get back, to get out of the train, to get back home. But if you're on the train for 3 days, it's going to take way longer to get back. And sometimes what I see, and I guess what I can see with myself as well, that people are waiting and waiting and waiting for the right moment to take action on their calling, to get help as well, to make changes. And the longer you wait, the more of the price you're paying at some point. So, and in that sense, what I mean with that is that often the price we are paying is more frustration, more anger, more misalignment, more unhappiness. Because if you're stuck in a job that doesn't serve you, or you're in a relationship that is not really healthy, the longer you stay there, the more draining it gets. And often we wait for this moment, this crumbling down moment, this Kali moment, where everything just gets pushed away, gets wiped out, and we hit this rock bottom to change something. So it might be, that you wake up one day and you say, I really can't take it anymore. It might be the burnout. It might be the redundancy. It might be that someone else is breaking up with us. So a lot of people wait for this moment where it's so painful to stay in the situation that they have to leave. But the good thing about your calling is that you can also make the change, and you can also decide before everything crumbles down to leave, for example, the job, to look for something more aligned, to start something on the side as you're building your business. So you have a pathway to build that business alongside your current job. And when you have that calling, also ask yourself, what is standing between you and that calling? Because often we think we are going all in or we are doing the thing, but most of the time we are not. And I think that is a realization that I've also had, where I've done a lot, I've created a lot, I've, for example, launched this podcast, but I think in many ways I've still held myself back. I've had a safety net that I could fall onto, which obviously is great and is great for your nervous system. But at the same time, I also knew that that was slowing me down because there was only so much time I could invest into my business, and I can serve clients, and there's only a certain number of clients that I can take on, that I was limiting my own growth. So what then happens is that sometimes or in my case, it only works for a certain amount of time, right? Once it's lived its purpose, once we are not in alignment anymore with what we want to create, that very thing gets destroyed. And sometimes it's because we want to, voluntarily leave, or sometimes it's because the universe has decided that that's just not serving us. And I've experienced that multiple times in my business, from what I already shared before, like a workshop collaboration not working out, which really forced me to do my own workshops, which then led me on the path of getting my first one-on-one clients. So sometimes when things crumble down, and when I was in the kirtan session, we also talked about this. In yoga, we look at these 3 states, right? There's the state of creation, the state of maintenance or maintaining, and the state of destruction. And a lot of us, we always want to be in the state of creation and maybe maintenance. That's like, creation is when we start something, it's exciting, we try out something new. It can also be scary. Maintenance is like the state where we know what we're doing. We just keep going. Maybe if you're, for example, in a job, you might have been in this job for 2-3 years. You know what you're doing. It feels comfortable. And that's where people get comfortable. And then there's the stage of destruction, or in the tower deck, the death card, which many, many people fear, even though we need death in order to create. So in yoga, there's always this cycle. So it's creation, maintenance, and then destruction. But in order to get back to creation, the destruction needs to happen first. So we always go through this cycle. So if you want to create something, if you want to bring something into this world, if you have this calling to start your own business or share your gifts with the world, ask yourself, what needs to change? What do you need to let go of in order to bring that in? For example, for me as well, I made a conscious decision to stop teaching yoga classes because I was pouring a lot of energy into that. It didn't feel aligned at that time anymore, and I wanted to start this podcast as well. So I decided to close that chapter in order to have space and energy and focus to create a new project. So if you want to bring something into the world, look at what can you shift, what can you change to make space and room for that energetically as well. That could be things in your routine, for example. It could also just be letting go of certain relationships, or maybe moving from a full-time job to a part-time job to make more space and room to grow your own business. And I also know that following your calling feels very scary, of course, because what we do is we try to predict the future future based on the past. So the past gives us the evidence of what has worked, of who we are, of the results we want to see in the future. But when we step out of our comfort zone, we want to create something new, we don't have that proof. And so our mind is trying to find the proof in the past, and that's when we talk about confirmation bias as well. We try to predict and only focus on the things that we believe. And then we recreate that in our current reality. So when it comes to following our calling often asks us to do something we have never done, which then means that obviously it's very scary because it's outside of our comfort zone, our familiar zone. And that's when most people never act, because it just feels scary. And I totally get that. And I'm also at a point where I need to decide. And I think part of me has decided, and I think that's the other thing here, that you probably know what the right thing for you is in your heart. Your soul knows what to do. But then pulling the trigger or actually following through with that feels very scary. So for me, I've been sitting with this decision of, okay, should I really, take that risk and receive probably higher rewards, or should I just keep going how I am going currently or how I was going, and probably see the same results and the same level of growth that I have seen over the last years in myself, in my business, etc. So that's kind of the decision where my mind pulls me into of like, okay, this is safety. You've done this before, you know what you're doing, you know how to do it. Let's just keep going the way that things have been going, and that just kind of makes sense. And then on the other side, I have that calling, that excitement, that trust to make changes, to go all in, to change parts of my business model, parts of how I've been running my business. And that is just a lot more scary because I don't actually know if that's going to work or when it's going to work, right? How long that might take for me to fully implement, to fully see the fruits of my labor. And so maybe you can identify with that as well, that there's a part of you that wants to do something, and that calling and that intuition and that soul speaking to you. And then on the other hand, your mind and maybe also the fear tries to keep you where you currently are. So I'm not saying, you need to quit your job tomorrow and go all in, because that can also feel overwhelming. And I'm grateful for how I have structured my business, how I've built my business over time, starting with being full-time employed and then step by step kind of reducing the employment hours to a point where I can dedicate more and more time to my business, of course. But we need to look at how can you create space for what you're really wanting while at the same time also feeling safe. So there is a fine balance between staying where you are and going all in. And in between is the middle ground, where I was talking before about what can you shift in your current life right now to create that space and at the same time create safety. So for me, for example, when I was going from a full-time to a part-time job, I still had that financial backup that even if I had 0 clients, I would still be able to pay my rent, my bills, etc. But at the same time, I had more time for my business. So that was a good compromise for me and my system of saying, okay, maybe I'm not saving any money, but this is kind of where I feel comfortable that I have money coming in and I still have more time. So is there something that you can start and you can find a compromise of, okay, maybe I dedicate one day on the weekend to building my business, so I can, build it alongside my full-time job and then maybe eventually drop down to part-time or become a freelancer or whatever it is for you. So how can you create a setup where you give space for your calling and you start building that evidence as well? Because that's what builds our self-trust. That's what makes us believe that something is possible, is when we see the evidence. And at the same time, we also need to learn to trust before we have the evidence, because that's often the thing about manifestation. When we want to create something, we don't have the evidence yet. As I said before, that we often think we can predict the future with our past, but if you want a different future, we can't actually predict it based on the past. So we need to trust before, we need to show up before we actually see the results. So that's always the first step. But then as we show up, the results will be coming in and will back up what we want to create. So for example, if you start showing up for your business, if you start posting, if you start talking about your offer, if you start creating an offer, then eventually you will get your first client, and that will start building trust that, okay, one person is willing to pay for this, so there must be more people out there who are willing to pay for this as well. Coming back down to reminding you that it's worth following your calling, because your calling, as the word already says, will keep calling you. It's that inner voice that will keep knocking at your door. And the longer you wait, the harder it will get. So I really invite you to just find a little bit of distraction kind of in your life, to let go of certain things, to make that space, to listen to that calling. And when we take those small steps, it's a lot easier for us. So you don't need to see the entire 5-year plan, the bigger picture yet. But start taking some actions bit by bit, intentional actions. So know what you want to achieve with this, what you want to do in some way. And then, take that messy action. Just take one step at a time. And as you gather more data by doing that, you can reflect back and see, is this still the direction I want to head? What changes do I want to make? So we always want to operate in a way of taking action, but then also reflecting on the results we are getting, and seeing if that's still in alignment with what we actually want to create and who we want to attract. So yeah, this was a little bit of a different episode, of a kind of a brain dump of what's been going on in my mind. But I so hope that this helped you in any way. And yeah, that you can really create that inner confidence and safety to follow your calling. Because there's a reason why your calling is in your life. There's a reason why you're being called to do certain things and help certain people. So I really just hope that, this episode inspires you to make that space for it, and to know that you're the creator of your own life. And look at all the things that you've created already. That was a realization I also had in this kirtan session. I just remembered how powerful I am and I can be, and all the things I have manifested in my life. From my partner, that I literally, I was in an active manifestation process when he arrived in my life. So I actively manifested him. To, my first corporate job during COVID when no one was hiring, to moving to Australia from Germany just a few weeks before they closed the border. And my business, this podcast, my clients, running a yoga session for the council here, and a big local event at women's festivals. So many things that I've manifested. So I invite you to also look at what have you already created in your life, because that's probably the evidence we want to look at, and the evidence that we should search for, the evidence that you actually can do it, rather than the evidence that it's not going to work out. What's the evidence that it actually can work out? What's the reason why you can make this work, or why this could be really successful for you? So I'm going to leave you with that. And if you feel called to share any insights, I'd love to hear from you. You can find me on Instagram at Sabine Lehnhardt. I'll also put the link in the show notes. And I'll see you in the next episode. Bye.